So it seems the three men died and were waiting to receive entrance through the pearly gates. The first said to St. Peter, I was a preacher of the gospel, serving faithfully for over 40 years. Peter told him to step aside for further consideration. The second man said, I was a preacher of the gospel, and I served my church faithfully for over 50 years. St. Peter smiled at him and said, step aside for further consideration. A third man stepped up and said, I was not a preacher of the gospel, just a government worker for 6 months. In what governmental department did you work, my son? Inquired St. Peter. The man replied, I work for the Internal Revenue Service. St. Peter said, you come right in. Well, the ministers were upset. How could you let him come in ahead of us? We served for over a lifetime. St. Peter said, this man scared the devil out of more people in 6 months than you have. This text that Marty read was about scaring the devil out of God's people. This does not sound like the Jesus that John the Baptist's father Zechariah spoke about when he prophesied. He will guide our ways in the path of peace. This does not sound like the Jesus that the angels were singing about when they broke through the heavens, scaring the devil out of the shepherds, as the angels loudly proclaimed, glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to God's people. Jesus had just finished teaching his disciples about the danger of greed and how it was God's good pleasure to share the kingdom with them. And then at the next breath, Jesus talks about bringing fire to the earth and being impatient until the fire gets started. And you know, fire talk is really scary for us Southern California folk. And then having a baptism to go through, which of course means his death. Why has the peace-loving, turn-the-other-cheek Jesus now going to turn father against son, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, and worse, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law? In most families, you don't need Jesus to do that. You know the answer. Because the people are not reading the signs. The people are not hearing God's message. There's a theologian who said, if you're looking for trouble in the gospel, with this text you hit the jackpot. Luke writes, Jesus has turned his face toward Jerusalem, the city that he knows will kill him. Jesus labels Jerusalem as the city that murders the prophets sent to her. So you see, Jesus is restless, ill at ease within himself, longing to have this hardest of missions with all of its pain and suffering over with. And then there are these people all around him, these people whom he has loved and nurtured for 3 years, who are following him in large crowds, hoping to get something from him, but not getting it. The miracles, the teachings, the raising from the dead, the serving of one huge meal to 5,000 guests, not counting women and children, they never get counted. So really 15,000 people, all are signs that heaven is God sending Jesus to redeem and transform a world on a collision course with disaster. What was so bad about the year 1? Oh, you know. The Roman Empire was expanding, conquering cities and whole countries, paying no regard to the cultures and religious traditions. No health care, no unemployment, no insurance, no retirement plan. The Romans only cared that taxes be levied and paid. Today, in 2019, taxes are still levied and must be paid, and no one seems to care, or no one seems to be able to do anything about the fact that health costs continue to skyrocket. Companies are hiring young people as independent consultants rather than employees, so they don't have to pay these kids unemployment insurance or offer retirement benefits or set up health plans for them. What's the difference in that time and these troubled times? In the year 1, the temple religious leaders who were supposed to be the go-to comforters and pastors for a conquered nation already so heavily taxed When your country is in danger, you go to your spiritual leaders for guidance. These religious leaders heaped additional religious taxes and obligations upon their own people. When the people had to pay or be excommunicated from the temple, they had no access to God. Today, religious institutions open their doors and bid everyone, come right in. You are welcome here. It's a song we just sang it. And then the churches began to debate. What do we mean by welcome? All men? All women? All heterosexuals? All others? All fully functioning bodied people? All races? All ages? In a time of huge polarization, the 21st century church has its own tax. The tax of unworthiness. Conform, make yourselves more worthy. Feeling shut out, people are killing themselves or killing other people. What is so different about these troubled times? In the year 1, the rich were observing the law, which said that after a certain amount, the rich people were not responsible to help anyone in need, including their own parents, including their own families. Today, many of the rich are getting richer on the backs of the poor. We see every day icons of the community are making astronomical profits on enterprises like porn and sex trafficking. Not too far from the doors of these churches, I heard a grandmother tell a story. She was walking her child to school, and she was warned that a person was trying to drag the child into the car to take them someplace. What's so different about these troubled times? In this text, Jesus has us by the shoulders, and Jesus is looking into our eyes. Jesus is screaming, break away from your nearest and dearest who are entrenched in the soul-killing status quo of a corrupt system. Break away from those who impede you from doing my will. Father against son, mother against daughter. You've heard the list. How do we break away? In the face of Jesus' agony, how do we at least begin meaningful discussions? This week we have witnessed the huge resistance to Congresswomen Tlaib and Omar visiting Israel and Palestine. During this ongoing debate over their visit, politics was turned against politics, wasn't it? Countries were turned against president. Prime minister was turned against country. Muslims were turned against Jews. Jews were turned against Christians. Not because they were trying to break away and try something new, but more because they were thoroughly entrenched in their sameness. But in the midst of more political outfall and embarrassment, a young Jewish woman at the Israeli-Palestine border observes. Where children absorb their society's perspective toward the other, toward the enemy, from a young age, it is important for a parent to take an active role in working against the fear and hatred that seep into our consciousness through the media, seep into our consciousness through our friends, seep into our consciousness through our families. This mother added that when tension between Jews and Arabs is high, it's very obvious in her neighborhood. The border police are out, additional checkpoints are set up, and there is more monitoring of the Palestinians. Her little daughters see the frightening authority and power of the soldiers and the vulnerability of the citizens waiting in long lines, and they ask her, "Why, Mommy?" She says, "I remind my girls that the Israeli soldiers are just like our family members, some of whom serve in the army, and that the Palestinians facing hardship are just like us, trying to go to school, to work, and the park." One way way this young mother counteracts fear is by enrolling her children in a mixed school with both Jews and Arabs who study together in Arabic and Hebrew. A different educational unit at the Palestine-Israeli border is called the Hand-in-Hand Center for Jewish-Arab Education. And it brings together Jews and Arabs in 6 schools. When Israeli extremists set fire to one of the schools, both the Jewish and the Arab families joined together to rebuild the school. One parent said, "We found a home here in our shared life, where we create something together that does not erase where we came from, but that builds a space with enough room for us all." The kids get together and pray, and while the kids think that the play dates are simply fun, their moms know they are key to building a different future. She explains at their young ages they're learning to love each other. As they get older, we'll talk about systemic injustices and security threats. But for now, this is enough for our children: friendship and love. At the Israeli-Palestine border, there is a group called Combatants for Peace, a grassroots organization of former Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters. These men and women who formerly picked up weapons of violence against each other now advocate together for the weapons of words and shared stories and books. Says one fighter, "I want my children to see that even people who used to participate in violent actions now realize there's a better way." A Palestinian Christian mother of 3 and director of the Arab-Israeli Biblical Society wants to teach our children the biblical foundations for peacemaking. At this 21st century point of so much lex talionis, an eye for an eye, these people on the Israeli-Palestine border, these people that I mentioned, are modeling what looks like, and please don't judge me for talking about other religions, they're modeling what looks like good old-fashioned, oh my God, we do this every Lord's Day, we got to go to the table theology. Looking each other in the eye and in the heart and really understanding that all that stuff my mother and my brother and my sister told me about you wasn't true. And all that stuff your father and your uncle and your mother-in-law told you about me isn't true either. As humdrum as it may seem, for those of us who follow Jesus Christ, it is knowing that we live in troubled times. We live in troubled times, and then coming together in the presence of redemption. I loved it when Marty said, "I love having communion every week." We need to have communion every week because of what we've been through every week. Coming together in the presence of redemption, knowing we have been forgiven. We have been forgiven. Knowing that we have been forgiven, how does that govern how we treat everybody else? We forgive them. That's a tearful, troubled Jesus looking into our eyes on the way to the cross and begging us to, on his life, break away from old relationships and ways of thinking and give his way a try. God, we grieve when governments get in the way of free speech and free expression. But we give you thanks and praise when mothers at the borders, at the Palestine-Israeli border, the United States-Mexican border, and borders all over the world, when mothers join together in coalitions to try to find a way out of the mess that society has made. We thank you for every single person who has the courage to break away from old ways, look into your face, and try to follow your way. Help us in big ways and little ways to always be radical advocates of your inclusive love. In your Son's name we